Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCI Recording Studios. Today I wanted to get into something a little bit different, maybe a little bit more exciting for some of you and probably a little bit more dull for others of you. But I wanted to get into what it takes to actually write and produce music. And the reason I wanted to get into this today was because over the years of me being an audio engineer, producer, and all that kind of stuff, writing music, I've had the privilege and honor to work with several interns over the years and teach them basically how to do what it is that I do. But what surprised me lately is that the interns I've been getting in, they're asking questions that are surprising to me, largely because they're not the same questions I would have asked when I started getting into engineering and production. And so maybe I give a little preface to this. When I first got into engineering, the questions I would have had would have been stuff like on signal flow, or stuff on compression, or EQ, or maybe even more specifically, how to get certain sounds. Like, for instance, how do I get this specific drum sound, or this specific guitar sound, or this specific whatever it is sound? The questions that I'm getting asked are, these are people that are coming from college level courses, they're asking me stuff that I consider kind of more basic, which is, how do I write music? How do I produce? What's MIDI? How do I create melodies and chord progressions? How do I craft songs? And it was surprising to me because this is stuff that I knew coming into the game. I never had to think very hard about it. Not to brag, and if this comes across as me bragging, I apologize. This is not my intention, but writing music has always been the easiest thing in the world for me. It just, I don't know if it's a natural gift or whatever, but like it's something I've never had to struggle with. I'm not an expert, maybe, songwriter. I don't know if I write the best music ever in the world, but it's always been something that's come very easy to me, and I've never really had to struggle with that part of it. But that is the part that most of the people coming through, most of the interns coming through my studio have struggled with. And so I thought it might be informative to get into some of the basic concepts of that. And I'm going to keep it as simple as I possibly can for now. And as I do more videos on this subject, we'll get more into the weeds. I also need to preface that I am by no means an expert in music theory. All the theory I learned when it comes to music theory, it was learned after the fact. Meaning I wrote a song, and then I learned that, oh, this was the theory behind that song. And I guess maybe I should preface that even more by saying there are certain things that theory is very useful for, and there are certain things that theory is not useful for. What theory is not useful for is writing music, generally speaking, although it can give you maybe a few clues or insights. What music theory actually is, essentially, is just a language that musicians can use to communicate their ideas to one another. Much like if I went to France, I would speak French in order to communicate my thoughts and ideas to the people of, France. Music theory is a way to communicate my thoughts and ideas to other musicians. That's essentially really what it boils down to. So I'm going to try and keep the theory as light as possible in these videos, largely because A, I'm not an expert, and if you want more insight into music theory, I suggest checking out other YouTube videos. There are people on there that have a much deeper understanding of it than I do, and they would be great people to learn from. What I'm here to do is try and break it down as simply as I can on how music is made. Now, essentially what we're going to do to begin with is just start with the idea that there are two components when it comes to music. There is duration or time, and then there is pitch or notes, okay? And those are the building blocks of all music. So for instance, if I were to play this note here, which is a C if this guitar is in standard, and I'm not sure if it is or not, but hopefully it is, but this is a C note, if it is in standard, and I can play that note or that pitch for a duration of time, whether a long time or a short time, okay? Music is made up of that pitch and duration, okay? And you can change up the pitch and the duration to make your music interesting. For instance, to just listen to this may not be the most exciting song you've ever heard in your entire life. But if you add a little bit of rhythm to it, or duration, time, let's see if I can actually play this thing. That's the same note, but now I'm adding some rhythmic variety or duration variety to it. Or I can start changing the pitch as well. Okay, and so that was just me changing the pitch as I went, and the duration more or less stayed the same. That is the basic building blocks of all music, is pitch and duration. And in music theory, they call those things different terms. Again, I'm just trying to keep this as basic as possible. Once you understand that pitch and duration are the building blocks of all music, well, then it's a matter of understanding how to manipulate those things in a pleasing way. And so there are things that you can do that can sound better than other things, for instance. This probably sounds better than this. Okay? And there's a reason for that. We'll get more into that later. But it's not to say one is necessarily right and the other is wrong. It's just that generally speaking, one might sound a little more pleasing to the other, but that doesn't mean either or doesn't have its place. When it comes to writing music, this individual pitch, what I'm calling a C note, that's called a note. It's in the name, C note. When I change the pitch from a C to something a little higher, what I'm doing is I'm going from a C note to a D note, and that's me changing the pitch. Now we'll get into more of that later in the theory behind why they're named and how you can figure all that kind of stuff out in a later video. I'm just trying to hammer out some of the basics right now, okay? So when we're changing the pitch, we can go up or we can go down. It doesn't matter. It's whatever, sounds right to you. There's no right or wrong when it comes to music. There's what sounds good to you and what doesn't sound good to you. If you like it, great. If you don't, change it. That's the best advice I can give when it comes to music. It's trying to figure out ways to make these duration and pitch vary in pleasing ways, or ways that are pleasing to you as the composer, the writer, etc. So we have our individual notes, like that. When you take those individual notes and you stack them on top of each other and play them at the same time, you have what's called a chord. So in this case, this is a C note. This is a C chord. A C chord is comprised of the notes C, E, and G. We'll get more into that later, but it's stacking the notes C, E, and G together, playing them at the same time, that gives you the chord C major, or a C major chord. All right. A chord is essentially, basically defined as taking two or more notes and playing them at the same time. So this would be a chord technically, but it's not a full C major chord. This would be technically called a C5. A full C major would sound like this. All right, and you hear the difference a little bit, right? We'll get more into what that difference is, but a full C chord, a full C major chord is played with 3 notes. That C5 chord was just played with 2 notes, even though I'm playing 3 instances. 2 of those notes are the same. So this is a C chord, or this is a C note, and that is a C note. They just happen to be spaced apart, but they are the same note. They just have one is higher in pitch, one is lower in pitch. Technically, it's called an octave. We'll again get more into that later. But when I'm playing two notes when I play this C5 chord. I'm playing a C, G, and then a C again. In order to make it the full C chord, we need to add in the E chord, the E note. Right there. And now it's a full C chord. You can also play it like that. There's a lot of different ways to play C chord on a guitar or piano or whatever. Anyways, so the basic things to understand right now is that a note is an individual pitch, and a chord is a sequence of those pitches stacked on top of each other. All right? And in a C chord, the notes that you are stacking on top of each other are a C, a E, I cannot play. C, E, and G. All right? That's a C major chord. C, E, and G. We'll get more into the theory and how that's all made up later, but the important thing to understand for now is that all music is essentially made up of chords and melody. A chord progression, as we discussed, is a sequence of notes stacked on top of each other, or not a sequence, are notes stacked on top of each other and played at the same time. And a melody is essentially a sequence of notes played, a note or a variety of notes, we'll say, played in a sequence. So that would be a very basic example of a melody, and you can play that melody over that C chord. Alright? Very basic, I know, but that's the point. We're trying to keep this very basic. It's for people that don't understand anything about music but want to learn how. So we're putting together our chord and our melody. And that's essentially all a song really is playing a sequence of notes as your melody, and then putting chords underneath that melody, although that's not strictly needed in order to be considered a song, at least according to copyright law. But that's a whole other animal. I guess I should just mention, when it comes to copyright law in the United States, a song is technically defined as a lyrics and melody. All right, chords are not necessary. You cannot copyright a chord progression, for instance, because you'd run out of music very fast if that were the case. What else? I think that's probably good for today. We will get more into how to count durations, how to sequence notes, scales, keys, all of that kind of stuff in future videos. But for today, I really just want to hammer home what the difference between a note and a chord is, because it's not necessarily obvious, I guess, to some people that a C note is different than a C chord. A C note is an individual pitch with a duration, either short or long. A C chord is a series of notes stacked on top of each other and played at the same time. In this case, with a C chord, it is C, E, and G. And again, you can play with the duration, short, long, however you want. Notes and chords, melody and chords. Notes are made up of melodies are made up of notes. Chords are made up of notes. It's just a matter of how you play them, etc. Anyways, I hope that this has been helpful. Like I said, I'm going to do more of these videos. We're going to get more into things like how to count, how to figure out your durations, in other words, your time. We're going to get into how to sequence your notes, your melodies, and get into scales, key signatures, things like that. Maybe the different types of chords. For instance, right now we've just covered one chord and its major form. That's a C major. All right, a C minor chord, and again, we'll get more into this later, but this is just a preface. A C minor chord is, instead of playing an E, you're taking that E and you're making it an E flat. And we'll get into what flats and sharps are in other videos in the future. But for now, a C minor chord is a C, an E flat, and a G. And it sounds like that. C major, C minor. All right. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful, and we'll continue more on this in the future. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Bye.